Hi, this is Tudor with a new tutorial. This one is on displacement map. The first part of the tutorial is going to deal with basic building of the displacement maps for Freeform Pro, Shapeshifter, or the regular Freeform plugin. What I'm using right now is CS55 and the Freeform Pro version 1. But the basics of the tutorial can be used in any of the Mettle plugins building displacement maps. So what I'm going to use a free texture from the fps-x-games.com site from their Sci-fi pack. It's a royalty-free texture, free to use for commercial or personal use. Is the fifth one that I downloaded and that I'm going to use. What I did, I created a 720p, 25 frames per second, 10 seconds long project, brought in my image, created a camera and a spotlight, and then pre-comped the image and applied Freeform Pro to my pre-comp. I like to work this way. I like to put my texture and my displacement map inside of precomps, because this way it's easier to alter them and to manipulate them once I get into the project. So I just created a precomp with just a texture inside it. I'm going to rename that and call it simply texture, and then I'm going to duplicate that and then rename this one displacement. Let's name it displacement map, actually, just to make it easier. I'm going to bring that one in as well, turn the visibility of the layer off, and then go into Freeform Pro and choose that layer, the displacement map layer, as displacement. I'm going to make sure that I have this tied to adaptive tessellation, and then check adaptive on. We're going to start building our texture. I'm going to lock the main comp window and then open up another comp window for the displacement map. Drag this one to the side so I can have the two side by side. And in here in the displacement map pre-comp, I'm going to start building my my composition for the displacement map. First thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a solid. Make this the size of the comp, make it somewhere around 50% gray, and then hit this OK. And this I'm going to call base, just to know that this is where I'm building from. Whatever is lighter from here is going to be higher. Whatever is darker is going to be lower than this plane. So in order for me to see where the shapes are, I'm going to duplicate the texture layer, slap this one on top, give it a 20% opacity, and then now I can kind of have an idea of where the shapes that I need to build should be. I'm going to make a new solid, and I'm going to make it lighter. I'm going to make a lighter gray. Bring this one underneath my transparent texture, and I like, you could do this with shape layers as well, and in some situations you might even want to do that, but I'll show you why I like to work with solids and with masks in order to create my displacement maps. Now you can see that there should be a bevel around the shape here, and I'll show you how you can easily make that. Just go kind of like in the middle of this bevel, and you can draw a first shape. Gotta extend this all the way down here, and then I'm just going to add some points. One here, another one here, and then of course if you really need a lot of detail, you can zoom in closer and spend a lot of time futzing around with how you build your displacement maps. But this, for the tutorial's sake, I'm just going to roughly draw the shapes. And here I have the shape. I can turn off the top layer, and then in my main comp, go closer with my camera in here, so I'll be closer to the side that I'm working on so I can better see the effect that my shape is having on the displacement map. And then I'm going to feather this. Let's say I'll give it a 15 pixel feather. And then you can already see how there's a nice bevel created with the shape, and you can go back instead of 20, let's just put 50. This way I'll have a higher displacement here so I can better see what's going on. Now, just to show you why having a mask, it's easier, because not only the feather that gives me the bevel, but also I have a mask expansion here. So if I just play with it, there's all sorts of shapes that I can easily create just by playing with the expansion and the feather. In this case, I like to leave it at 0. And then I'm just going to duplicate this mask, flip it, and then bring it on onto the other side, and then adjust my mask accordingly to fit this shape. So now, if I go back to my main comp and I move the camera around, you can see that I have already created a bevel for the two sides, which are raised, and then I can either change my height from inside the displacement map by applying just a simple color correction effect, the levels, and then playing around here with a level of gray, and that will affect my displacement map, the height of my displacement. Or if I want to go darker, the sides go down, as you can easily see in the image here. It's worth saying that already, just by applying the 15% even of the original texture on top, you get some nice displacement going on just with that. You get some roughness to the texture, and it could be worth using that. And here I'm also just as far as the render settings go in Freeform Pro, I just have no anti-aliasing. But if I turn this one to very high, you can already start seeing that it looks quite smooth and nice, and there's some nice texture that goes on the surface here. And in order for me to better see this, I can also play with the light and see how that affects the look. Double click on the light. This can bring up the control panel for the light, and I can play with the intensity of the light. So there it is. I have just a nice displaced tile here that I can use for something, I don't know, floor, a bridge, and a spaceship, whatever it is that I want to build, or even build a wall. And of course, if I displace this even more, the higher the displacement, the more detail I get. And as you can see, the plugin is moving pretty fast, and you get all this nice detail in here. But let's say if you consider that this is too much, you can always go back to the displacement map and change the opacity of this to even just 5, and then you get a lot less effect from the image itself, but you still get enough to get a nice, interesting surface here. You can go ahead and, just like I showed you, build a bunch of shapes to displace the image even more. So let's say on top of the second layer, you can create another solid and make it even lighter. And then on it, you can just create some, let's bring this back up so you can see where the shapes are. You can just create another series of shapes. Bring this one back to 2. And this one, I'm going to have to apply levels to it as well. Make it lighter, and then I'll pop up, as you can see here on this side. So I can also just duplicate the shape and move it to the other side. And there it is. I have it here as well. And if I'm looking again for bevel, I can just add a feather to the mask, and there it is. I have a nice bevel on both sides. Of course, I can go on the other side with it, just create holes in here, and that could be interesting as well, just to create some diversity to the shape. but in this case I think I just want them a little higher up. Now, a little trick that I want to show you. You do have in Freeform Pro and in Shapeshifter the generator, which can replicate shapes, but let's say you want to create a floor with this shape. With the generator, you can create and extend the shape on one of the axes, on X, Y, or Z. So let's say you go to the generator, create 5 instances, and you want them distributed equally from center, and then not in Z, you want to offset them on the Y by 1600 pixel, because the image itself, the texture, is 1600 by 1600. And this way you just have 5 of these tiles equally distributed from the center. And then if you just, let's move this slide up, and then you can see more of what's going on here. There you go. I have a nice bridge that I can use. And as you can see, even by leaving the render, the anti-aliasing to very high, the plugin still moves really fast. One trick to do if you want to create a floor, you have to do it both for the texture and the displacement map. So you go into the texture and you change your composition settings. Let's say you want to add again, like you want to have 5 tiles, so you want to add 4 rows more, 2 to the side and 1 side and 2 to the other. So what I'm going to need is I'm going to need to change the width of this comp, and instead of 1600, I'm going to need 3200 pixels more on each side. So total of 6400 pixels plus 1600, that is 8000 pixels. And then what I'll do is I'll apply to this texture motion tile. I'm going to change the output width till I'm going to fill in my texture here. As you can see, it's full. I have 2 extra tiles on each side. And then in order for the displacement to work, I'm going to go into the displacement map, and I'm going to pre-comp again all these layers, call this displacement map base, and then I will apply again the motion tile effect to this one, and there we go. Now I have the final floor. You can tweak and make more complex details in the displacement map, and thus obtain a much more complex result. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to stop here. I hope it has inspired you to create more interesting things with using Freeform Pro and Shapeshifter for After Effects. The final result you see on the screen was tweaked by Kevin Shires using the Freeform Pro version 1.5 plugin with the project files that I've created. Signing out, this is Tudor Ted Gillespie.